What is up guys, and welcome back to the channel. And in today's video we're going to be doing something a little bit different. I'm going to be talking about sampling, and we're not really going to be on the machine at all in this video. This is going to be more of a talking kind of video. Now this format that I usually film in the kind of top down style doesn't lend itself too well to this style of video, so I'll try and make it as visually interesting as possible. I'll try and throw some b-roll and stuff like that into the video to keep you guys engaged. But yeah, I think the tips in this are going to be really valuable, so if you can stick it out, I'm sure there's a lot for you guys to learn. And we're going to be talking about habits with sampling and things that you really need to unlearn. I think these are mainly aimed at beginner sort of samplers, but some of the points that I raised, I think we're all kind of guilty of slipping into them, even as heavyweight samplers as well. So yeah, these tips aren't an attack on you guys from me. I'm guilty of most of these as well, and I'm trying to break habits and become a better sampler. So these are some tips which I think will help me and hopefully help you as well. Now, just before I start guys, check out spvids.com where I've got all my drum packs and merch, and I've got a brand new pack called Lo-Fi Drums Volume 6, which is now available for download as well. I will be doing more content about that pack in particular in the coming weeks. All the sales go a really long way and keep me funded doing what I'm doing here. Okay, so let's get into the first point of this one. Sample habits that we need to unlearn. Point number one, sampling from sample playlists. Now, you see these pop up on streaming services, and you see these a lot on YouTube as well. These are sort of curated playlists that have a bunch of samples in them. Well, guess what? Every man and his nana are probably digging in those and sampling them. They've been sampled to death, basically. So I do feel that these playlists are pretty good when you're just starting out, because they give you a kind of idea of what to look for. But you can become lazy and it can become a habit. I know I'm sometimes guilty of this, of kind of relying on those sort of playlists to find samples, and that's really not a good idea. Like I said, they've been sampled to death. You really need to try and put in a bit more work and try and find those more obscure samples that maybe people haven't used quite as much at the moment. Now that's getting harder and harder these days, obviously, but avoiding playlists is going to be a great place to start, because yeah, those samples, I'm surprised they haven't turned to like digital dust, because they would have been sampled that much. But yeah, try and avoid those if you can. I know they're a good starting place when you're a beginner, but the sooner you can get out of those playlists the better, and you can start finding your own stuff to sample that's more original. Point number two, the second habit which I think you need to unlearn, is not listening to a full track when you're getting samples. So I think it's quite easy to dismiss tracks if they don't have anything at the start of them. And again, I'm very guilty of this. If the intro doesn't work, or there's too much percussion, or there's talking over the instruments that you want to sample, it's very easy to just flick to the next track. But I've got a great example here. So if you're digging for drum loops, for example, or drum breaks, check out a track called Spinning Wheel by Dr. Lonnie Smith. I'll put that on the screen for you. There's a drum sample break at around 4 minutes 30 in this record. Now, would you ever think to go that deep into a record and try and find a sample? Well, there's a really nice isolated drum break there. Go and check it out. I know some of you will skip through tracks as well, but there's a chance that you could miss things like this. So yeah, listening to full tracks is a really good idea if you've got the time. There's little gems hidden all through records, not just at the start and at the end. There could also be other isolated instruments as well, like melodic instruments, pianos, bits in the tracks where the drums drop out so you can sample. That doesn't always happen just at the start and the end of a record. So listening to the whole track on a record is definitely a good way of finding more unique and rarer samples compared to those of us that are just listening to intros and then skipping if the intro doesn't work. Okay, tip number three, another thing which I think you need to get away from to become a better sampler, is always sampling the same genre. Now, this is one that I'm really guilty of. I pretty much exclusively sample jazz or soul, and I think they're two very, very common genres to be sampling. However, there's loads of samples in other styles of music as well, and one good thing that you could do to break this habit is try setting yourself a challenge. Try and find a sample in a style of music which you wouldn't usually think there would be samples in. So for example, you could say as a little challenge, I'm gonna try and find a sample to make a beat from a metal artist. So you know, you wouldn't usually go to a metal artist to dig for samples, but if you start going through different albums by metal artists, you might just find something that you can sample. You might find a drum break, you might find a little melodic piece that you could sample. It's definitely worth exploring different genres, and if you don't want to explore different genres, try tacking a different geo on the start of soul. So for example, if you're always listening to American soul, maybe try Italian soul or try Brazilian soul or something like that. That can usually bring up quite interesting results as well. So yeah, always sampling the same genre. It's going to turn you into a certain style of beat maker, which may be fine for some of you, but I think it's nice to sometimes branch out and look at different genres. There's plenty out there to explore, so yeah, definitely give that a go. And with streaming services and things like that, YouTube as well, it's really easy to do that these days, so there's no excuse really. go and give it a go and see what you can find. Okay, my fourth tip, not listening to enough music in general. I think this is a really big thing, and it's something that I've really tried to change already in 2025. Last year, for some reason, I hardly listened to any music, and that's really strange for me. I'm a big music head. I just couldn't get into the habit of it. So when I looked at my stats at the end of the year, because I log everything that I listen to, my listens were just so low that I've decided, wow, I need to change this. So I've already started listening to way more music, taking the time to sit down and listen to albums that I used to love or new music as well. And listening to as much music as you can is going to be a great way to find more samples. The more music you're listening to, the more likely you are to find new samples. So I definitely recommend this, and listening to music in general is just fun anyways. So I highly recommend that you try and take as much time as you can to listen to music. Get yourself a nice pair of headphones if you haven't already got those, so you can listen on the move as well. Go out for walks and put some music on, put some albums on. And again, with Spotify and YouTube and those kind of services, related music is so easy to find these days. So you could just listen to an album and then more suggestions come on, you can find new music to listen to. And then just set up some playlists. If you find a sample, stick it in a playlist, and then you've got that for later, and you're killing two birds with one stone. You're listening to music, which I find really enjoyable, and you're finding samples as well. So yeah, that's another habit to unlearn. Don't just listen to intros of songs to try and find samples from, and that's the only music that you listen to. Actually make a conscious effort to be someone that's interested in listening to music, and the samples will follow after that. Okay, my fifth and final tip is something that I'm definitely really guilty of. It's settling for the first thing that you find that you think could be useful to sample. Now, this is definitely a habit you should really try and unlearn, and I'm going to share with you a good way which I think can help solve this problem. So when you're digging for samples, it can get frustrating when you can't find anything that you want, and you dig in and nothing's coming up, and then all of a sudden half a sample might come up. So you take the time to process it, you run it through some gear, you put it into DAW, whatever it is that you do, and then you get to make the beat and it doesn't really sound as good as you were hoping, and it's because you've just gone for the first half idea that you found. Try to get out of this habit, and a good way to do that, I think, is, again, going back to the previous point which I mentioned, is setting up playlists and kind of looking for samples in bulk, not just looking for one sample to make one beat. Try and make a habit of taking time to do some digging, basically. So set aside an hour, listen to a load of records, and everything that you find, just stick it in a playlist. Then you've got a collection of samples that you can go to and dig through and sort of hone those down into the best ones, and then you're going to get much better sounding beats, in my opinion. So it's easy to settle for half ideas because you're getting frustrated, but you really do have to put the work in with digging, and I think that's a good way to go about it. Do it in bulk, get those tracks saved in playlists or get them downloaded, get them saved into your SP if it's from a vinyl record like on the table here. Get all those saved, and then you can have a beat making session where you dig into that pool of samples and choose the best ones. I think that's a much better approach. Okay, so there we go, guys. A lot of talking in that one. 5 sample habits you need to unlearn, and I think those are going to really help you to become a better sampler, find better samples, and ultimately make better beats in general. So I really hope those tips are useful for you. I think they'll be particularly useful to beginners, and maybe quite a good reminder to a few of you that may have picked up some bad habits over the years as well. As I say, these are not an attack on you. I'm really guilty of all these as well. So yeah, hopefully I'm going to improve this year as well. Don't forget to check out those links that are mentioned in the description to help support what I'm doing here, guys. It really does help, and I am reliant on those sales to keep going. And apart from all that, thanks very much for watching. Shout out to my members for the monthly support, and I'll be back with another video very, very soon.